preparing for grad school interviews? I hope this can help. But first of all, congratulations. So seriously, getting an interview offer is a really big deal because it means that they're interested in you. So you might think, oh, I really am gotta just go in there and impress them. That's all my job is. But really your job is going to be also to try to learn more about their program, and their job is going to be try to recruit you. So a lot of places even call it a recruitment weekend or a recruitment visit or whatever rather than interviews. There's going to be a bunch of stuff other than just the interviews, but the interviews are a really important part and probably the part that you're going to stress the most about. So first off, don't stress. Remember that they're interested in you. That's why they invited you. And so now you just have to show them that they were right and that this is really that you want to be a scientist, that you want to go to grad school, that you want to go to their grad school. And really you want to show them your passion, and so try not to get too worried. Try to be authentically you, and let that passion for science shine through. Make them see that you want to be a scientist, and they can't train you to want to be a scientist, but they can train you in how to do, like, pick up a pipette and stuff. So you want to show them that you already know how to think like a scientist. This is going to be when you're talking about your research and things, and then you're going to want to tell them, like, show them that you've really thought about this, that this isn't just like oh, I don't know what to do, so why not go to grad school? Grad school is a big investment. It's going to be a lot of your time. It's going to be a lot of their time and a lot of their money to train you. So they want to make sure that you're actually motivated to do it, that you know what you're going into. Speaking of knowing what you're going into, let's discuss what you're knowing. Let's help you know what you're going into when you go into these interviews. So here is some advice that I collected from Drs. Leemor Joshua-Tor, who was my, when I did my PhD, she was my advisor, like my lab head, my PI, as well as Dr. Alexandra Newton, who is the president of the IUBMB, the International Union of Biochemistry and Molecular Biology. So we've got some real experts on board, and then I'll interject with some of my own comments as well. I haven't sat on one of these committees that actually decides the people, but I've been through a lot of interviews. And so I had no clue what to expect when I was going in, so I want to help you have a better sense. Although it's going to be kind of weird because some of them are virtual and some of them are in person. I've never done a virtual one, but I've done an in-person one, so I'll tell you a little bit more about that at the end. But yeah, so here is basically some things to do to help prepare yourself for those interviews, and then how to actually excel during those interviews. But remember, first and foremost is to remember that you're there for a reason. But also people remember that if you didn't get chosen, that's not necessarily a reflection on you. It's probably not at all a reflection on you. You might have just gotten like a grumpy reviewer chosen to review. But anyway, let's get into some details. Let's talk it out. Let me start with the major caveat that what I'm going to be talking about is going to be my experience with like biomedical science type programs. So if you're in a different type of program, then this might be different. But this is how it typically works for these biomedical science type programs. And so with these programs, you apply to the program rather than applying to like an individual lab. And so then you're going to do lab rotations, test out several different labs before choosing one. And so again, this is going to be from field to field. Things are going to vary widely, but this is kind of the basics. And hopefully this interview advice will be helpful no matter what field you're going into, but some of the things about the whole process other than the interview might differ from place to place. Okay, so now let's get into things. Your goal for the interview is to show them that you can think like a scientist and truly want to be a scientist. These interviews can seem really intimidating, but try to relax and keep things conversational instead of stiff and clammy. So try to come in prepared, but don't be like rote memorizing, like don't memorize some script that you then recite. Instead, just make sure you know your stuff and have ideas in mind of what to talk about, as we'll get into. But know that your conversations might go into really weird places, and that's totally okay. And I think that the interviewers sometimes probably get bored of asking the same things over and over. So you might get some kind of interesting questions, or you might get to talk to them about some interesting things. So one of the things is to kind of like prepare yourself ahead of time is to research what these professors do if you get their schedule ahead of time. Sometimes they don't tell you until really soon before who you're going to be interviewing, but sometimes you get to know sooner, and you want to make sure that you know like a little bit about that person's research. Like, so don't just memorize the title of their latest paper, and don't feel like wedded to prepared questions that you'd come up with. So like improvise if they bring up something that interests you, or it's okay to talk about something that they did a long time ago, or not just their most recent things, and why it was interesting to you. You could really get into some really interesting conversations. I think one of my favorites was with Jack Shostak. That was a really interesting conversation about the origin of life and whether you needed water, and things like this. And I was able to have this fun conversation because um, I wasn't feeling like I had to go follow like a set script, and I had knowledge of like his work and that sort of thing. So know a little bit about them, and show interest in their work. Not necessarily that you want to be working in their lab, but that you are interested in learning more about their work. And typically they'll be very happy to talk about their work, but you want to make sure that you get time to talk about your work as well. So when you're preparing for that interview, make sure that you prepare to be talking about your work, not just to be prepared for talking about their work. And you want to come into it thinking like a scientist, talking like a scientist. Talking like a scientist, I'm not talking about just throwing out every jargony word that you can think of. What I'm talking about is knowing why you did what you did. Thinking like a science, being able to explain through the experiment why you were doing the different things that you did. Don't just spout off which techniques you used. Tell them, like, if you're talking about a technique, tell them why they used the technique. And don't like say anything that you aren't prepared to explain. And so you want to be able to as Dr. Newton says, be prepared to explain how a technique you used worked if asked, and never say anything that you won't be able to explain. And so if you can't explain something now, find your mentor, find your Google, find whatever, and figure out how that technique works. Figure out why you were doing what you were doing. If you need a little refresher, I have on my blog, I have tons and tons of content on various biochemistry techniques. And you can find links to all of them, or at least most of them, on my lab techniques page. So hopefully I have what you're looking for. You should know why you were doing what you were doing. You should know how what you were doing works. And you should then be able to tell them if they ask. And so you don't need to go in there like explaining every single little detail. Leave them some things to ask you. And so when you're talking about your research, you can start more broadly, be more succinct. And then if they ask you a question about it, that's when you can go into detail and really show off that you know why you were doing what you were doing. And you want to be able to put your research in the bigger picture. You want to be able to so like, okay, I wasn't just doing this because the grad student I was working with said pipette this into this. You want to know why you were actually doing that, like why they wanted you to do that. If you weren't designing your own experiments, why were you doing what they said? Like why were they having you do that? And if at all possible, you want to show how you were able to take independence. So even if you were working with some grad student in the lab, I'm sure there were times where you got to have more of a say, where even if it was just troubleshooting how an experiment works, try to show that independence that you had, that taking the initiative to try something new or to troubleshoot various things. Show them that you have that drive to make the things work if the things weren't working, or if you see something weird results, follow up on it. So you want to show that you can take that initiative, and that's going to show that that you really want to be a scientist, that you know what to expect in grad school, at least from that standpoint, and that you are like willing to take that initiative, that you can think through things, that you have ideas to test out, and that you're really, really curious about the answers to those ideas. And so you'll go and you'll do the 50th PCR reaction to try to get the answers that you want. Okay, so that was basically that. Oh yeah, give sufficient background too on the project. So you might go in there thinking like, okay, this person knows everything. I don't need to give them any background because they know it all. But really, your project was on some like small aspect of some niche topic, and this person might research something totally different. Even if they research something related, they probably don't research that exact thing that you were researching, and they can't keep all the knowledge in their head. So they're going to need you to explain some background to them. And so make sure that you give them enough background to understand the project. So if you were working on a specific protein, make sure that they know like what that protein is and how it's involved in some pathway, or where it is, and why it's an important topic to study. Basically make sure they have that background, and then make sure that once you've described what you did, you say how you interpret the results, or how those results might have broader implications, even if they're little implications, and then basically like what you would do in the future. So yeah, so it's the same type of advice that I give, but this is one I gave when I was talking about writing the grad school applications that got you to this point. And so basically the same things apply for the interview. You want to show them you can think like a scientist, you not just say you know a lot of techniques. So explain what the goal of the project was, how you approached it, and what you found, no matter how small, what that means, and what the implications are. So, and throughout all of this, make sure that you're not saying things that you don't understand. Don't just like toss in big fancy words if you don't want to know what they mean, or just for the sake of showing them that you know big fancy words, because what they really care about is, can you think like a scientist? It's part of how can you think of a scientist would be, what would the next steps or future directions be for your project? And so if you were to stay in undergrad forever, what would you do next? And it's okay to talk about work that was done. You might have multiple research experiences from your grad school or whatever. And so don't feel like you need to just talk about the most recent one. Talk about what's the most impactful for you, which you had the most independence on, that sort of thing. Okay. And yeah, so your work might be made progress. And so that's totally fine. Just this is right when I talked about when writing, but when you're doing the interview as well, and this is totally okay. And don't be experienced at the difficulties, remember. And yeah. So okay. Now they'll also probably ask you, part of like why grad school or whatever is like, why you want to go to grad school. Part of that is like what you want to do with your life. And that's okay if you don't know exactly. And part of it is like, what do you want to research now? And it's okay if you don't know that is exactly now. You don't need to know what you want to research, just be sure that you know that you want to research. So as Dr. Newton says, you're not expected to know what your thesis research will be. It's more important that you have a passion for science. Your thesis work is training and not necessarily the research area you'll devote your career to. You can fine-tune that for your postdoctoral studies. So a postdoc, basically, if anyone doesn't know, that's after grad school. You can like kind of go work in another lab to get more experience, kind of gain more independence on the way to whatever you want to do with your life. But you should be able to explain what you love about research and why you want to go to graduate school in a particular area. So this goes back to all that we've been talking about. So why you love research, show them that you love research, show them that you're authentic yourself, and why you want to go to graduate school, why you want to go to that graduate school. And when I talk about particular area, it doesn't need to be like an exact precise area, especially for these umbrella programs. They want you to keep an open mind. I had friends who changed from like neuroscience to plant biology as their interest, and that was totally okay, because in that program it was an umbrella program.
So you want to show them like it's okay, you can have an open mind, and don't go in there thinking like, oh, I'm going to tell them about this exact thing I want to study, because well, they probably don't have a lab that studies exactly that, and when you join a lab, you're going to be restricted to what the lab works on. So you have some flexibility, and I talk more about that in other posts. But basically, the PhD is about learning to think like a scientist and learning to do science. It's not about like, this is what I want to study for the rest of my life. That will come later. At this point, you want to show that you have an open mind. Or if you, I mean, if there is something that you plan on, you really want to research in the future, that's fine. But don't think that you're going to be researching that in grad school, probably. I mean, like if we're talking about like a really specific thing. And also, it's important to show the open mind in terms of experiments can take you in weird places. You might learn, like might have to learn a bunch of new techniques in order to answer a question. When your experiment gave you a weird answer, you might have to then go and use a different technique to try to follow it up. And so you want to show them that you're like have that flexibility in order to go where the science is taking you and in order to answer those questions. So Dr. Joshua-Tor, who professor at Cold Spring Harbor Laboratory, that was my PI during my PhD work. She says to give some thought to and be prepared to answer questions about why you want to go to grad school, what you're looking for in a graduate school, and why you're looking at that particular graduate school or program. So this is similar to the advice that I was giving when I was talking about writing your grad school applications. And so basically, you want to make sure that you can show them that you know what's involved in grad school, and that why you're looking at this specific place. So is it you probably so this could just be like one in many interviews that you're going to be doing at many different places if you're lucky. And so you want to show them like why them. They're going to do their best part to tell you why them, but you want to come in there already knowing about them. You want to have done some of your research, know specific things about this program that interest you about them. And so then you just have to learn like the bells and whistles, the cool stuff like that. But you should have a reason why you applied there. And so you want to be able to express that reason. Why them? So some of the questions you might get asked are like, what do you like best about research? And what do you like least about research? So science has a lot of ups and downs, and there's going to be a lot of ups and there's going to be a lot of downs. And in order to get through those downs, you have to have that passion to remember like, what do you really like about research? So give some thought to that. And you want to show them that you've given thought to why you want to do this, but also that you have a realistic expectation that things don't always go right. And so you want to show like, yes, you do have something that you like least about research. We'll get more into this later when we talk about how you talk about your work. But first off, they'll likely ask you like, well, first off, they might say like, are your parents in science? Because a lot of times people go into grad school and that sort of thing who's already had like their parents are scientists and things like this, so they've kind of it's more known. So I had like no idea that grad school was even like a thing until undergrad, and so it's harder for people outside of the like already academic realm to learn about these things, and which is why it's really important that we try to get a more diverse background, and we do better outreach to try to get more people and try to like demystify the whole thing. So that's part of why I do the post that I do, is to try to like demystify the experience and tell people about what to expect with these things, and that you can make it, and that so first of all, know that they're choosing you for an interview because they believe in you, and you just have to believe in yourself as well. And that can be really hard, but try, and it gets easier. Well, except for some days it's hard, but still. Anyway, that's getting off track from how did you get interested in science. And it's okay if you don't have like a big aha moment. I didn't have a big aha moment. I just like I just was always been interested in science. And then like I said, I didn't know that grad school was a thing. And then I learned it was a thing. And I'm like, yeah, this is what I want. And I did research in undergrad that really convinced me that this is what I want. And yeah, so don't feel like you need to come up with some story about why you got interested in science. If you do have a story, that's great. If you don't have a story, that's fine. And don't worry about it. Okay, they might ask you what your favorite course was in undergrad. Don't feel like you need to say OChem or something. For me, it really was OChem. I really loved OChem. I loved being able to learn to think like a molecule. But I know a lot of people don't like OChem, and I know that the grading can get really stressful and things. And it's important to show that you're well-rounded. And so you can say like your favorite course was some random, like, I don't know, some weird, totally outside the scope of science, even humanities, some really obscure topic, I don't know, but just be able to tell them like why, and kind of like how does that shape your thinking about science, or how did your thinking about science shape why you liked that class. How, and yeah, so don't be afraid, don't feel like you need to hide your true interests. You should be authentically yourself, and if that means that your favorite class was some like anime making class, well, tell them about why, tell them about how those visualization skills help you in the lab, or how you're able to draw up pictures of your experiments or whatever. Just somehow could be able to connect it if you can. Okay, and then like, why do you want to get this PhD? It should be more than just, well, I just did my undergrad and I don't know what to do, so let's get a PhD. No, you should have a reason why you want to get a PhD. You should really, really, really love science. If you don't really, really love science, then it's going to be like impossible to get through grad school, at least impossible to like get through it with being happy, because like I said, there's going to be those ups and downs, and there's going to be a lot of ups, don't worry, but there's going to be a lot of downs too. And so I'm not trying to discourage anyone from grad school. I'm so glad I went to grad school, and I feel so incredibly fortunate to have gone to grad school, and really that's why I'm helping like pay it forward and things. Going to grad school got me to where I am now, which is going to get me to where I want to be in the future. Hopefully being a professor and teaching like undergrads in the lab and in the classroom. And I'm really I couldn't do that without a PhD, but it was a hard journey to get through it. But that's just the nature of, you learn by trial and you learn by error. And one of the things they might even like ask you about is like, I've gotten a couple of times in the interviews, they'd be like, we got a lot of straight A students here, like type A personalities. Though, that there's going to be failures in science. There's going to be hard times. And then like they want you to know that. And then you can talk about, oh yes, I know that. I was able to overcome this problem I was having in the lab. No one could get this reaction to work, and I finally got it to work. How did you troubleshoot through it? Show them that you know that there's going to be this troubleshooting involved a lot of the time, and that you're able to do that troubleshooting. And yeah, so this is just the first step, or I guess one of the first steps in an exciting PhD journey. So basically, once you join a program, the programs vary from place to place, but they typically take some classes, do some teaching or some TAing, lab rotations as we discussed, and then you choose a lab, pass your qualifying exam, and do your thesis and all this other stuff that finally get your defend your thesis. So talk about all your work and write it up, and then yeah, basically there's a whole process after this, but this is the first step, the step in the door. And if you want to learn more about the rest of it, you can check out more on my blog. So a day or two after the interviews, I sent personalized thank you emails to the interviewers. So personalized, don't just send a boilerplate, and make sure that you put the right name on there. Don't expect them to respond, but it's a nice gesture. And then you wait for the offer decisions to be announced. And that's pretty much it. But that was just the interview portion. And the interview is just one part of the experience. So it's going to differ from place to place, especially if it's differing, like whether or not it's in person or virtual. But the main thing to know is that they're going to have things that are going to try to entice you to their institution. So it's not just the one-way thing. They're going to be telling you about their programs. They're going to be, if it's in person, they often like take you to local event, like if you're in New York, you might go to Broadway or something like that, go out to dinner. Often with other students, this is a really great chance to kind of get a feel for whether they like the program. They might not come out and say like, oh, I hate this place, but you can kind of get some vibes and kind of get a sense. They'll often give you like a housing tour and things. It's really important to talk to the students about like the price of living. Is it an affordable place to live on a graduate student stipend? What are some of the things they like about the program? What are some of the things they don't like about the program? Is it hard to get into the lab that you want to work in? Various things like this. What's the teaching experience like? And so these are all things that you can learn from the students, and you'll probably have student interviews, both like in person and virtual. Note that at these, if they're in person, they often have like or have a bunch of alcohol involved. I mean, not like a bunch, but I mean, they're at some, like you might go to a restaurant and there's out drinking and stuff. I don't drink, and I was really nervous that this was going to be an issue, but it totally was. They were totally cool with it. But so don't feel like you need to drink. And especially like, remember that these interviews, the grad students, they don't have like the final say, but they can give input back to the program about what they thought about you. And so you don't want to go and get really drunk and make a fool of yourself during this interview. And so you should use the interviews as those outings or whatever as a chance to really learn more about the program, about the environment, the weather and things like that. These are all things that should play into your decision, not just whether or not you like the science. You have to really be able to picture yourself living there, and being happy and things like this. So that's really important stuff to find out. And yeah, so they're also trying to like, so it's them trying to like wow you to their place, lots of swag and stuff involved, as well as you learning about them. And then in the interviews, that's where you're really going to help them learn about you and learn about why you are a good fit for their program. But try to relax both during the interviews and during the rest of the experience and really enjoy it. It can be really hard and really stressful, but remember that you've gotten that interview for a reason. They believe in you. Now you need to believe in yourself. So I hope that this was helpful. Best wishes to everybody who is interviewing. And yeah, hope this helped. Much more on this and other things on my grad school thesis and postdoc related posts page. So I hope that there's things in here that can help you no matter what stage of the PhD journey you're on. And best of luck.